Welcome to Beyond the Books podcast. I'm your host, Susan Stotterl. Today, I'll be talking about how America's historical anti-intellectualism is destroying American literacy. The definition of anti-intellectualism includes hostility and mistrust of the intellect, intellectuals, and intellectualism. It denigrates education and philosophy and believes art, literature, and science are worthless. Politics or religion, or a combination of both, often motivates this. Calling themselves populists, they see educated people as a status class, trying to control them. They perceive that honest political discourse and higher education dismiss the concerns of ordinary people. The U.S. has a long history of anti-intellectualism. It began in 1642 when Puritan John Cotton wrote The Powering of the Seven Vials. Paraphrased, Cotton claimed that the more learned and witty a person was, the more fit he was to act for Satan. One should ignore the learning of the Jesuits, episcopacy, and prelates. People should not allow them to deceive them with their own pompous, empty shows. Not every Puritan agreed with Cotton's contempt for education, one being John Harvard, an early benefactor of the college that bears his name. In 2021, economist Thomas Sowell wrote that anti-intellectualism in the U.S. began in the early colonial period because of a weariness of the educated upper classes. Colonists were escaping political and religious persecution from their educated upper classes of their own countries. In the colonies, there were few intellectuals who discussed ideas and learning rather than producing products and services. Most of the white population of colonial America came as an indentured servants and black population as slaves. Most of the white population of colonial America came as indentured servants and the black population as slaves. Immigrants arriving later were peasants or working class. Wealthy and middle class people had no reason to take the risk of immigrating to what could be a very hostile environment. That America arose as an economic, political, and military power proved to them it was all their doing, not because of class or books. The amount of anti-intellectualism varied from time to time. Most Americans lived in a rural world of hard manual labor and agricultural work prior to industrialization in the late 19th century. Their ideas were more homogenized, yet Americans of the 19th century were literate people. If you examine the McGuffey readers for grades 1 to 6 that came out about 1835, they taught literacy and thinking, although somewhat influenced by a Presbyterian Calvinist theology. They were often used in one-room rural schools. The ideal American man was literate enough to read and write. He was self-made, whose knowledge derived from his life experience, his own reading, and not from advanced formal education and academic study. Grade 6 was adequate, but if you check grade 6 primer, the reading level surpasses what sixth graders can do at this time. As Isaac Asimov stated in 1980, there is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there always has been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. The quality of American education ranks lower compared with many countries, including non-wealthy and non-industrial nations. The U.S. is in the 38th place for math literacy and the 24th for scientific literacy. 80% of Americans lack scientific literacy regarding the Earth-Sun relationship. They believe the sun revolves around the Earth. According to the Pew Research Center, 77% of American public school students can't identify George Washington as the first president of the United States, and only 50% of American high school graduates are prepared for college-level reading. I would like to end today's podcast with a quote by Gene Wolfe, who was an American science fiction and fantasy writer. This, then, is the new illiteracy, the illiteracy of those who can read but don't. Unlike the old illiteracy, it does not debar its victims from power and influence. Those long dead men and women who learned to read so that they might read the Bible and John Bunyan would tell us that pride is the greatest of all sins, the father of sin. And the victims of the new illiteracy are proud of it. If you don't believe me, talk to them and see with what pride they trumpet their utter ignorance of any book you care to name. What Mr. Wolf observed was that the U.S. is on a dangerous course in the absence of critical thinking. Taking pride in ignorance does not prevent the natural world from collapsing around them. The old saying, you reap what you sow, is true. Ignorance begets ignorance that does not produce a livable wage and a sustainable roof over your head. That's all for today. I'm Susan Stotterell, and I hope you will join me again on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month, either on my website or YouTube.